have March here. So what's your question?
My boss is a very busy guy. He's like the vice president of the company, but then I work in health and safety, and somehow he's ended up being my boss. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to like go to him for feedback or to ask questions because he's so busy and sometimes he's a little bit short with me in the moment. How would you kind of approach this? Because I'm kind of wanting maybe one-on-ones with him down the line. Um, yeah, how would you kind of approach it?
And he's your direct supervisor.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I think there's three answers. There's three uh strategies you can sort of use to sort of to solicit more feedback from your boss. Um, but before we get to that, I guess why do you want the feedback?
I think just so that I know the areas that I'm like maybe doing well and the areas I can improve on, I think it's good because I'm kind of early in my career. Um, and I'm obviously trying to grow. So,
Is there anything is there anything happening right now that's leading you to believe that you're doing a poor job?
no, I don't think so. I think right now, um, I work kind of in the construction industry, so it's really slow right now. So right now I'm kind of feeling like there's not a lot to do. I'm kind of like looking for things to do. So in a way I would like to go to him and be like given more tasks to do.
Okay. Just to sort of before I get to like the like what you should do, just a few sort of like maybe frames of reference that might help you a little bit. So one is you said one-on-ones down the line, which may be helpful for you, but really one-on-ones are they're for the company and they're for your boss. They're not even really designed to be helpful to the employee necessarily. One-on-ones are part of operational wellness. So basically, when I would do one-on-ones, it was like intelligence gathering. It was trying to understand, trying to measure the engagement of staff, trying to know if the training that we were giving was working, the programs that we had everyone doing, if they were working. And then from that, it would help me make decisions about, okay, well, this message that we're putting out isn't getting through, or this training that we're doing isn't working. Or perhaps it would even be like this person that we thought was going to be promotable in the future. I don't know if they are. They don't seem super engaged. Or this person that I hadn't expected to be really engaged is really engaged. So I think one-on-ones are great because I think that all of that stuff is really important for the company, but I don't necessarily know if it's something that you need to be striving to get. Um, I understand that you want the feedback for self-improvement, but I think it's another thing to keep in mind is that like all the results are a measurement in the business. So when you say, "Oh, I want to know if I'm doing a good job," and for self-improvement, that's a priority that you should have, but the business, in a sense, doesn't care if if you're self-improving.
Yeah.
So if you're going to ask about feedback, you should keep that in mind that it's not in school. It's like, what's my grade? You know, like what did I get an A or did I get a B? But in business, that's not, that really isn't the objective of like anything to do with the business.
Yeah.
The, and that's not to be, and I'm not saying that to be like, that like oh like people don't care or anything like that. It's just the reality, right? Like that's just not what um that it's built for. So with that in mind, we can kind of there are ways like you do want to get feedback, you want to know how you're doing, and there are some ways to like really go about this. So the first, and this ties into what I just talked about, when you're when you're wanting to know how you're doing, you should be asking about the business. And most bosses are going to be more than happy to talk about the business. It's what they care most about.
Yeah.
So I would frame the questions of sort of like, oh, how's the business going? Was the client happy with what I did? No, actually, was the client happy with the results? Did we hit our goals? And those questions aren't specific to you and saying, did I do a good job? They're saying, is the business doing a good job? Obviously, you have a role in that. So you're going to solicit the feedback, but you're not asking about you because in a lot of ways, it's not about you.
Yeah,
And
that makes
again,
sense.
I'm not saying that to be harsh, but that's what you want. What you want to know is isn't did I get an A? It's like did the business get an A? And the person that gives the A is either is like the client saying, "Hey, you guys did a great job," or it's like we made a lot of money on this, or it's like we hit our objective, whatever the strategic objective is to like grow the business.
Yeah. Okay, that
So
makes sense.
yeah, so I think if you talk to your boss about that stuff, you'll you'll get the answers that you're looking for a little bit. And I think your boss will probably be like way more like engaged to talk to you because
Yeah,
that's the thing they care about the most is the
yeah,
business.
yeah,
The second is, and this will apply to like most jobs, but you can create habits for feedback. And when I help new employees like when I'm their boss and they're working for me, I kind of tell them they might come to me and say, "Oh, I want some feedback. I want to know like how I'm doing." And I'll like lay out this path for them. So the first is, and I'm sure you're doing these things already, but like the low-hanging fruit that you want to start with is, you're always showing up early. You're you're at least saying like hi to your boss. Like even just in passing, you're just saying like hi. You're just kind of doing that bit of a check-in. And if you're leaving at the end of the day and they're still there, you're going to want to say bye. The other thing that I hope you're doing at the moment is every day you have a daily to-do list, and ideally you have a weekly to-do list. So on Mondays, you sort of have like, oh, this is what I'm going to do this week. And then those things filter into every day. And then you might even have like an open to-do list. And often this will be things like, oh, something's a mess and I need to go clean it up. And it's not like I don't need to do it now and I don't, but it's like I would like to do this at some point. Or it might be a task that you want to learn at some point, and the priority isn't like it needs to be today or this week, but I want to learn how to do this at some point. And so you kind of want to have these to-do lists. And the reason, and this is how you're going to get the feedback, is at some point when you talk to your boss and you say hi, you want to be saying, "Oh, hey boss, how's it going?" And then you want to say, "This is what I'm doing today." And from there, they can say to you, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, March, that's actually not what we need to be doing today. That's like the wrong thing to be working on." Or they'll say, "Yeah, that sounds good. Go ahead and do that." And so you're kind of taking a bit of the ownership of the feedback piece because now you're going and saying like, this is what I'm doing today. This is what I'm doing this week. And you're kind of taking your boss isn't having to decide what you're doing today. What they're going to be able to say is that's a good priority. You're doing well, or that's a bad priority. We need to talk and like figure this out.
yeah,
So that'll get you feedback. The other is when you're when you kind of get comfortable with that, you also want to maybe again at the with the feedback. Well, it could be at the end of the day or it could be the following day to say, "Oh, that I did that thing. That thing I said I was going to do today, I did it. Or that thing I said I was going to do today is going to take me an extra day." So you're kind of giving like another feedback. They might be able to tell you like, "Oh, that should have happened faster," or "We wanted it this way," or "We wanted it that way." And then two more, which are kind of related to this, is one you should have when you're and I would do these in sort of I don't know where you're at, but I would sort of do this stuff in steps. It just don't be weird and just come in and start like being a totally different person like on
yeah,
the next time you start work. But like start this is kind of like you work towards this. And then you can kind of say, here's my to-do list today, and this one is my priority. And this is useful because then if you have like three or four things. I wouldn't really have I wouldn't really make it like much bigger than like three or four things. And you say this is my priority, you're being transparent in what you're thinking about and what is important, what you believe is important, and this gives your boss the opportunity to say, no, that's not the priority, or yes, that is the priority. And that's where you're going to learn. Like that's kind of ultimately that's the feedback you want to know. Or am I doing, like you said before, am I doing the right things? Am I doing the right stuff? So if you say, here are the four things I'm going to do today, and this one's my priority, you've you're just inviting feedback. Now you're just like asking, like
Yeah.
without asking for it, you're now asking for the feedback because you're being super transparent about how you're working and what you're doing. This can be scary for people because it is so transparent because you can't hide. I think some people that struggle with this, they're trying to hide what they're doing a little bit, if that makes sense. Like maybe they're not doing much. And so the last thing they want to do is go up to their boss and say, this is what I'm doing today. Here's my priority. And I'll tell you when I'm done because you can't hide what you are and aren't doing now. You can't hide if you're being lazy or not. And you also
Yeah.
can't hide if you're kind of incompetent or not. It really is like, but you got to be able, you got to, if you want feedback, you got to be transparent. And then the other thing, and this ties into like as you're learning more about the business is when you can start then talking about wins you've had. So you can start saying, "Oh, I did this yesterday and it went great, and here's why." And again, what you're going to do is you might be wrong at first, and maybe your reasons will be wrong, but again, you're going to be sort of by being transparent and sort of saying what you're seeing and what you're thinking, it's going to let your boss be able to say, "Actually, yeah, that was great," or "Actually, that could have been better in this way." I don't know. And and it's just kind of again it's inviting the question, so build those habits up, and a lot of it is just having these to-do lists and then being able and just kind of starting the conversations with your boss by saying what you're by being super transparent about what you're doing so they can tell you whether that is the good thing to do or that is the bad thing to do. Or if
Yeah.
you've mentioned previously about giving a presentation, so then the next day going to your boss and being like, I think that presentation went great, or I think that presentation went pretty good, and then he can say, actually, March, and then give the feedback. So I hope that helps. It's not like it eliminates sort of this question that I think sometimes people have, which is asking for just overall feedback. And I think that does freak busy managers out. That freaks busy owners and bosses out because it's so broad and it like it's asking for a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That is helpful.
So do you do any of that stuff now? Do you say hi to your boss? Are
Yeah,
they
like I feel
around?
like we get along very well. Um, and almost I feel like every time we end up talking, it's about like, oh, what'd you do this weekend? Like, oh, like how are your kids? Like it's we always are just talking about outside of
Right,
work stuff. So my fear is that my boss doesn't really know what I'm doing day to day or doesn't
right,
think I'm doing much because like we never talk about it
right.
like kind of in work.
What you just said, you're going to inject this into the conversations,
Yeah.
and it may feel awkward at first, but it's kind of like you can have your thing and be like, "How was your weekend? How are your kids? Good, good, good. Okay, well, these are the four things I was going to be doing today." And like that's
Yeah.
like it could be as casual as that. And then he can sort of take that in and decide and like give a response to that. And then if he's not if he's kind of being like, that's all good, or he's like, yeah, that sounds okay. Maybe that doesn't sound as satisfying to you as the feedback that you're expecting, but that is kind of like the level of feedback. And
Yeah.
then the third option, and this is if you're doing all of those things and you're still not finding you're putting in that effort and you're saying you're kind of opening yourself up and you're being transparent, you're asking these questions and you're not getting anything back. At that point, you have to make a choice that like, oh, maybe this place just doesn't do feedback the way I want it.
Yeah.
Maybe they just don't. And you can decide then, that I'm not saying that's like an automatic like you should leave the job, but you can put that into uh your values about what's important and say like, okay, this is something this place doesn't do. Like I just need to sort of accept that
Yeah.
and then decide what I want to go where I want to go after that.
Yeah.
But I would say if you do the habit piece first, I always find that like if I do the habit piece, I know I'm holding up my end of the feedback bargain. And so if the company I work for isn't like responding to that, I don't I feel pretty okay with myself to be like, well, I might just walk away from this.
Yeah. That makes
And it's kind
sense.
and it's sort of like I do equate this stuff to relationships. So it's like having a friend and you're just like, oh, I'm like really trying with this person to like hang out and they're always blowing me off. At a certain point, you're gonna stop wishing they were blowing you off and just be like, never mind.
Yeah.
That this person's just never gonna do like this person is never gonna be as reliable as I want them to be.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's totally fine. But it's like, it kind of sucks because if it's in work because it's like you got to go find like another job, but it's fine. And but you kind of have to make that you'll have to make that choice.
Yeah. Okay. That's good advice.
And the last thing I'll say is a lot of time feedback, I think it's valuable because when it comes, to be real, it's like when it comes down to like getting your review, which may be attached to like your compensation, you don't want that to be full of surprises to sort of not match what you're experiencing. So if you came to your review and you're every day you're telling your boss what you're working on, what your priorities are, and what you thought were a win, and then they said, March, we're not happy with some of the stuff you've been doing, you can be like, that's weird because I told you every single day what I do, and you
Yeah.
never said anything about it.
Yeah.
And that'll be awkward to say, but it's like you'll have the receipts, so to speak, of being like, I asked you every day. I told you every single day what I was doing and what my priority was. And every single day you were like, okay. So
Yeah.
you can't now come and say, well, you weren't actually we weren't happy. Or it could have been better or whatever. They had you kind of gave them the opportunity. But that's kind of worst case. Um, that'd be kind of worst case scenario. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I would definitely be, just try these habits and see if they work.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.